lot of times people are afraid to start feeling their feelings out of fear that they won't be able to stop. It was interesting. We always do an exercise with folks here, and when we do groups, and I'll do it with you. And that is, we have them name the ways that people use to avoid feeling their feelings. And then we did that exercise with the people in Rwanda. I brought that list with me, and I thought it would be interesting to contrast. The rule here is if you call out a way, that doesn't mean it's necessarily one you use. So let's just call out. What are some ways that you avoid, what are some things you use to avoid feelings? Food.
Exercise.
Work. Alcohol. Reading.
Sleep.
Yep.
Watching movies.
Yep.
Porn.
Pornography.
Remember the rule.
Reading. Sex. Sometimes people use one feeling to avoid another. Like maybe rage to not feel depression, depression to not feel anger. There's lots more.
Driving.
Driving.
Get in the car.
Yeah. Going on vacation.
Smoking, gambling,
Oh,
drugs,
All
Shopping.
the things. Shopping.
Shopping.
Yeah.
procrastination,
Cleaning. Procrastination.
impulsivity.
What?
Impulsivity.
Okay.
I do something immediately so that I don't have to stay in the feeling that I have, so I'll do anything rather than feel what I'm feeling right now. So they don't think it through, they just do something.
Okay, you've got the idea. This is an exact list as translated from Kirundi to English. Sleeping, drinking, sports, smoking, movies, TV, video, internet, music, activities to keep busy, prayer, talking, reading, sex, masturbation, pornography, you're on the roll there. Self-harming behavior, counseling, running away, drugs, food, sadomasochism, loneliness, isolation, working too hard, witchcraft, begging, shopping, vanity, sickness, joking, changing the subject, suicide, self-deception. I think that says how we're alike rather than how we're different. Isn't that incredible? Okay. So disconnecting from feelings in the original context is functional, but it becomes dysfunctional over time. It winds up getting generalized to other situations. So you walk up to a moment and it reminds you of the bad thing in the past, and you are flooded with all the feelings that belong to the past. It's irrelevant what's going on in the now when you start generalizing those feelings across situations. You wind up, because you haven't learned how to modulate, you wind up feeling only in the extreme as if you're in the original situation, or you wind up shutting down and going numb. And then folks wind up with uneven development. A lot of trauma survivors will be fully their age, fully mature in certain kinds of situations or relationships, but very young in others. Because those are the situations where they're triggered, so they keep revisiting them in the same old way rather than growing up in those situations. Makes it very difficult to build relationships when you are living as if you're in the past rather than in the present. And feelings don't just go away, they wind up getting pushed into the body and experienced as physical symptoms or acted out as acting out behavior. And so they don't just go away. The issue is that we all need to learn how to regulate feelings. The point is to do it healthfully rather than unhealthfully. And what we've discovered is a lot of the things that are typically diagnoses for trauma survivors, depression, addictions, overeating, anxiety disorders, character problems or whatever, are oftentimes faulty strategies. They're problematic, but they're not the problem. They're faulty strategies for regulating feelings. So the issue is to learn healthy ways to regulate feelings. And that's what we teach, and that's what we taught them. We talked about learning how to stay grounded in the now. Grounded meaning that you are informing your thinking and your feeling and your behavior with the truth of what's actually going on, rather than being triggered, which means your thinking, feeling, and behavior are not really informed by what's going on now, but what happened in the past that you've been reminded of. We teach basic strategies for staying grounded. The most specific one, helping people learn how to engage their 5 senses. So they're actually determining what is it I'm smelling, what is it I'm hearing, what is it that I'm tasting, and actually taking in factual information. And then learning how to have a dialogue between their intellectual mind and their feeling mind. A lot of times people intellectually are very aware of what's going on, very aware that what they're thinking may be distorted, but on a feeling level they have a hard time operating out of that understanding, operating out of that intellectual understanding. And learning how to make distinctions between past and present. The relevance to the genocide, again, would be that there are so many triggers that folks encounter every day in the life around them. They can't avoid the triggers. And since they can't avoid them, they need to learn how to stay grounded in the face of them, rather than responding to them. And a second skill that we teach about learning how to regulate feelings is correcting cognitive distortions. Most of us assume that an event happens, and that event determines how we feel, right? Looks like this. You have an event, and that leads to a feeling. What we know, though, is there's an intervening situation, and that is our thoughts. Assumptions, conclusions, perceptions that actually dictate how we wind up feeling. And then we have thoughts about how we feel that determine what the next event's going to be, that affect our behavior. And around and around and around we go. And what we know is when you get triggered, this process can happen so quickly that you're not even aware of the thoughts anymore. You're not even aware of the conclusions that are driving your feelings. They feel instantaneous. And so our effort when we work with folks is to help them get this process slowed down, encourage them to review what their thinking is in a state of calm, so they're not dependent on just what happens when they get triggered. Are these thoughts, were they ever true? Are they still true? Are they partially true but not all true? Okay? So it's pretty difficult sometimes to control the event. It's pretty difficult to control how we feel, but we can regulate our thinking, and that's going to have a big impact on how we wind up feeling. Folks who have been through a traumatic situation and come up with how they feel about that, it's pretty difficult to argue with that with them because it's been loaded in them at the very most primitive place. It's automatic thinking. They have determined how they're going to keep themselves safe in the universe, and we load that at the same place that we have loaded pulling our hand off the hot burner. And so it's pretty difficult to get them to change their mind about that. So you have to help them sort it out in a state of calm. The other thing that folks do is they selectively attend to anything that supports that point of view and they discount the rest. Can you relate to this? You know, we all have some tendency, if we are operating out of a certain belief, we shop for the things that support that belief. And then we can also induce people to treat us in ways consistent with that belief. You know, if you're pretty sure you're going to be a social failure, so you dread going to the party and you fortify yourself with alcohol before you get there, you're probably going to be a social failure. And people are going to treat you in ways consistent with that. And the last skill I'm going to talk about is learning how to calm the body. What we know is that trauma creates a huge stress response in the body. And if the stress is long enough and significant enough, it can actually do neurobiological changes in the body. When we're stressed, all kinds of things happen. Gastric juices spill into our gut, stress hormones spew into the bloodstream, blood vessels constrict, perspiration increases, we have muscle tension, and that creates a setup for all kinds of physiological problems. GI trouble, autoimmune disorders, it complicates cardiovascular problems, the list goes on and on. So there's a lot of motivation for learning how to interrupt the stress response. One is so you don't do any more damage to the body. And the other is because the physical arousal that goes with that stress response escalates the negative thinking, escalates the intensity of the feelings, and around it we go. Then those thoughts, escalated thoughts, fuel the physical arousal. The escalated thinking fuels the physical arousal. So you've got this self-perpetuating cycle. So you want to learn how to quiet that, how to calm that. We teach particular strategies for learning how to quiet that. One of them is we call mindful relaxation, where we encourage people to do a 5-step thing, starting with taking a nice deep clean breath. Because when we're stressed, the first thing we do is hold our breath, and then when we do breathe, we breathe very shallowly. And so having people breathe deeply, align their posture, do a wave of relaxation. I'm trying to think of what the other one is. Make a positive statement. And a positive face. That's right. Something about lifting the corners of your mouth, things fire differently neurologically. So a pleasant face, a fake smile, lifting the corners of your mouth and your eyes makes a big difference in how things work. And then having them identify relaxation strategies that work for them. One person's relaxation may be somebody else's trigger. One person may say, oh, I love to take a hot shower, it helps me my body calm down. And for somebody else, a hot shower may be a trigger. So it has to be specific to them. What we know is that when people have the capacity to regulate their feelings, and this doesn't mean that everything's just hunky-dory all the time, but they're not afraid to feel whatever their feeling truth is, they spontaneously are able then to grieve around what happened to them. And for a lot of folks, it's not just grieving what did happen that shouldn't have. It's about grieving what didn't happen that should have, especially with children. When children get hurt when they're young, it's that lost childhood that never really can be fully reclaimed. They can, you can learn to engage part of that as an adult, but you can't reclaim the childhood again, and that needs to be grieved. And alongside that grieving, in tandem with it, is the potential for being able to forgive. And that's what translation.
So one of the primary things that we taught in Rwanda was about forgiveness. Sharon said we spoke, we had 1 week, 5 days where we worked with Catholic clergy, and then we had another 3 days where we worked with medical personnel and school personnel. So these were teachers, principals, there were a couple of counselors, but a lot of the Catholic Church people that we were talking to, like, work in medical clinics associated with the parish as opposed to a hospital setting or something like that. So they were still kind of connected to the church. We also had a meeting with Catholic Relief Services, and we'll be doing some work with them again this summer. Again, the idea is the research that we were presenting about forgiveness, the model of forgiveness, how does it work, we think is going to work in another culture, but we don't know. And when we went in, again, it was reported very favorably. Yes, it makes sense. We understand this, it would seem to work for us too, and that was very gratifying. What happens, and how I got involved in it in the first place, is that we talk in our culture, and certainly within our church, we talk about forgiveness, but I also believe it's very much misunderstood, and we don't know how to do it. And so we say that we want to forgive, or we think we've forgiven, but then we find out that as soon as we see the person again, or as soon as we have a memory of what happened to us, up come the feelings all over again, and maybe it's not as forgiven as we thought it was, or at least how much we thought we had forgiven is still there. So those are two reasons to talk about forgiveness in detail. One is because it's misunderstood, and if we have ideas about what we think it is or think it isn't, and we're operating out of that, it might be getting in the way. And two, if we want to do it, we just don't know how to do it, well, that gets in the way too. The third thing is that it contributes towards hope. And we know that in terms of recovery, hope is crucial.